Hello, and welcome back to Chris's Ticks. It is finally time to follow up with the AESOP Tourbillon. Specifically, this one. Just a bit of a recap. This is the second AESOP Tourbillon that I own. The first one was traded away, and this one was purchased on the 11/11 sale of 2021. You might remember that video where I had announced a plan to tentatively do a long-term look at how this watch would perform, and I had a plan for how regularly I would view or, wear the watch, and what to do if I wasn't going to wear it. I can report that that did not work out. Not to say that I didn't try. I think that for the first couple months it did work out. However, just with the sheer mass of watches that I have, I just tended to not pick it up as often as I planned to. But that being said, this watch, over the past, more than 1 year, it has been on my wrist more than any other watch that I own. And that is saying something. You might have noticed behind me is a wall of watches in a 3D printed case. Just for some context, I've not worn a single one of those watches since they went in the case. I have a lot of watches. But the Tourbillon, that has been put on fairly regularly. Not as regularly as I would have liked, but it has been on my wrist. A lot. For me. And without further delay, let's get into the follow-up for the AESOP Tourbillon. Let's go over the usage goals I set out in the previous AESOP video. So, in the previous video, I said the following things, and I quote, "I'll make an effort to have this on my wrist at least 2 times a week, but I'll have it running at least 4 days a week, which I think is a pretty fair usage amount for someone rotating through a few watches." Let's discuss my actual wear pattern. I was actually pretty accurate for about 3 to 4 months. After that, though, it was on my wrist maybe twice a month, until about the 8-month mark, in which case it then fell to maybe being on my wrist once a month. However, generally I still remembered to wind the watch up at least once a week, so it would at least get to run until the power reserve went down. Although I will say that during the months of November 2022 to about February 2023, the watch did accompany me on some fairly rough traveling. I was on work journeys across the ocean via ship. These were not on giant cruise liners either, and we had to sail through some fairly terrible seas. For anyone who does know about sea state and waves, we ended up getting hit by a lot of waves that are in excess of 5 meters, and I got very seasick, just in case anyone was wondering. During these times where I was on board ship, I didn't actually wear the watch that often, because I was kind of afraid I was going to hit it against something and break it, but I did end up winding it up a lot just to let it run inside the watch box, so it was running. The troubles. I would like to say that this watch ran flawlessly the entire time, but I can't say that, because that would be lying, and lying is not good. Remember in my first video with this second Tourbillon, where I said the crown positions were not as clicky as the first one? Well, that statement came to bite me right in the bottom this February. We were on our way back to Canada Land, again via boat, and I went to put the watch on to actually wear it a bit, because I kind of got comfortable. And while I started to turn the crown to wind it, I felt a slip, and I noticed that in the winding mode, the time started changing, despite, the crown not being in that position. Very odd. I then pulled it out into the time set mode, and for some reason, it started winding the watch. And my initial thought was, super duper. The setting lever, I guess, was super weak and snapped. So, I took it off and wore something else until I got back home where I could actually address the issue. On top of all this, when we were actually on the way back to Canada Land, we got hit by probably the worst sea state. So, we were being bounced around by big waves, and I was tossing them my cookies every couple minutes. Hooray! The diagnosis. When I got back home and stopped puking, I began to investigate the watch. The back comes out pretty easily, it's just a screw back, and the stem release is a button, so that's nice. But when you have a look at the movement with the case off, you realize that, this is a front-loading watch. Luckily though, this is not a movement that requires a crystal lift to remove the crystal. It can be done with one of those case back poppers. You just gotta be pretty careful, as it's pretty easy to nick the case, and there isn't really an obvious slip to pop it. However, I'll show you where you can actually jam the tool to pop the crystal off. Once it is off, be mindful of the crystal gasket. This actually, on the first time I did it, kind of flew away and I had to search for it. So yeah, try not to lose that. At any rate, once it's out, all you really gotta do is pour the movement out via the front of the watch. Unfortunately, I didn't really get a video of the process of how I actually took the watch apart. However, it's not super complicated, and the watch comes apart more or less like any other normal hand winding watch. Look out for dial feet screws, you can get a hand puller to remove the hands, or a lever kit, and you'll be good to go. At any rate, back to the topic in hand. After the dial came out, it was really easy to see what happened. Remember again that I said the crown position settings were a bit sloppy feeling? Well, it turns out that a screw on the keyless works got loose, resulting in the setting lever not engaging properly, hence the functions kind of acting a bit wonky. And again, this was the reason why the crown positions felt mushy. It's really likely that the watch just came shipped this way, and was probably an honest mistake by whoever assembled it. And the likelihood is that as time went on and I kept using it, and probably the bumpiness of the ship didn't help either, but the screw likely became very loose at one point and therefore went from being the crown that was a bit mushy to the stem and crown not really engaging properly at all. And again, I apologize for not getting footage of this, so I'm going to use a different movement that I have lying around to show you the keyless works area, but generally all I did was reset the position of the setting lever and screw down all the screws in the area and make sure that everything was back in its normal position, properly tightened down. And this basically addressed the issue. Luckily, this is an easy fix. Basically just reset and tighten the screw. But I get that most people probably won't want to open their tourbillon up to do surgery on it. So just keep that in mind. You get what you pay for. And frankly, I didn't pay much, so I didn't really mind. Oh, one last thing though. If you do gotta take the hands off on this watch or whatever and reinstall them, make sure that when you do reinstall your hands that the hour hand properly clears that tourbillon viewing window. I initially did not check that and didn't notice it till after I reassembled everything and closed it up, and the hand wouldn't advance past the tourbillon window. So pro tip, just keep in mind if you bend the hour hand, make sure that you unbend it and it clears that window. Otherwise, you'll have a bad day. Closing statements. All in all, it's been about 19 months since that purchase, and it has not been problem-free. However, the problems that came from this weren't super huge, and I still think that overall, the watch is still a win for someone that just wants to dabble in the idea of tourbillons without becoming bankrupt. Just keep in mind the phrase, you get what you pay for. This thing is not some bespoke watch, it's a mass-produced piece of technology that brings the complication down to a price point that an everyday person could afford. Actually give your watch a good look over if you do actually buy one of these things. If something is wrong, don't be afraid to actually use the AliExpress support chat. I've found that they're actually fairly reasonable and will actually make an attempt to correct things. I've generally had pretty reasonable support from AliExpress. Maybe don't do what I did and ignore the squeakiness. Bring it up and see if they'll give you a hand. Now, before we wrap this up, I will add that I noticed that on some of the AliExpress ads for the AESOP Tourbillon, they began using a different movement. This one appears to have a blacked out case back. It's still clear, but the machine finish is replaced with like a black anodizing or something. And the actual rotating carriage of the tourbillon is a different design. It's a bit of a different look. I still prefer the version that I got, but if anyone picks up this other variant, let me know how you like it. So, what do you think of the watch now? Shall I keep this running more and check back in another year? Will more things break? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye!